Hello, I'm Reggie Young. I'm here with Osaid. Osaid, if you could please just take a minute or two to describe who you are, how you got started, and what you're up to.
Oh, damn, putting me on the spot. Okay.
Yeah.
So my name is Osaid Abuelnasr. I mostly run ecom businesses. I have about 4 Amazon accounts that I manage directly and plenty that I manage indirectly. The business that I work for is called Basatne. It's really a family business. It started off by my brother in 2009. And it was mostly just purchasing cell phones and flipping them for a couple bucks off Kijiji, which is to all you US viewers. It's basically the Canadian Craigslist. So the business started off in Canada in 2009, mostly doing cell phones, just wholesale off of Amazon completely. And in 2018, I joined in full time. I was mostly just dabbling with it before, but I joined in full time in 2018. And really, a lot of the products that we were selling could have been sold on Amazon. So I started off the whole ecom side of it, and it's mostly just been a lot of consumer electronics, phones, and whatnot on Amazon. We saw on Amazon, Canada, US, Germany, Australia, Japan. So we're all over the place in e-commerce. And yeah, so the business did in 2019, we were still in Canada. The business did about 20 million-ish. And then we moved to the US in 2019. 2021, we ended the year with 228 million in total sales. So explosive growth. And I think that's the direction that a lot of e-commerce businesses are headed in.
Oh, did you say 228 million? Did I misunderstand you?
Yeah, so the top line revenue is
Yeah.
228, and I go to a lot of e-commerce shows where I say, "Hey, we did 228," and a lot of people look at me like, "You're either lying or you shouldn't be at this conference." And I'm like, "No, you don't understand. It's 228 million, but a lot of this is it's wholesale, right? It's not like a
Right.
private label 228 million. So
Yeah.
the margins are very slim. It's 5 to 10%. So you
Yeah.
take 20 million-ish or so, it's very different than
Oh,
a private
yeah.
label. There's a lot more overhead.
Well, I can't imagine the person that would turn down 5 to 10% on 228 million. When we first met at the summit, I thought I had maybe I like was remembering a story from somebody else, but I remember I thought you had said 30 million. And I was like, even at 30 million, I was like super surprised. Oh, 30 million. Like even any kind of RA, arbitrage, wholesale, whatever you're doing, right? To have that big a number, I think is absolutely like phenomenal. So to hear now that it's 228 million that I had it wrong in the first place is pretty crazy.
We've actually done a bit of RA. We dabbled with RA, but mostly we're on like partnering with brands and really taking the products to the marketplace. And we do a lot of tier one brands too, like Google Nest, Ring, and all the other stuff. Obviously, Ring cannot be sold on Amazon, but we do a lot of distribution for them.
Yeah, yeah. I took a look at your website. You do have some really power brands that you guys are working with, like basically every major household electronic consumer brand you guys are involved with. So I think that's pretty awesome. If you could you maybe dive into a little bit of what your company does and your current goals and what you guys are trying to accomplish?
Yeah, so the business spread across multiple business units. So Basatne is really the holding company, and there's multiple business units in it. We have Incentiva, which is I won't talk about it much in this podcast. It's kind of irrelevant to the world of e-commerce as of now. But Incentiva is really a gift card payout solution that Basatne owns. And then we have Basatne, the e-commerce side. And on the e-commerce side, we do a couple things. We did do some RA for a bit, but that wasn't really a focus for us. RA is not something that you can scale to 228 million, but we did do some of it. Obviously, during COVID, there was a lot of RA opportunities. And then on the other hand, we partner with brands where we present them a case. It's mostly tier one, tier two brands. So brands that are already established, we don't do much PPC for them, and we take their products on e-commerce and we manage it for them, and we sell it for them. So that's what we do on the e-commerce side. The other part of e-commerce is really returns management and reverse logistics. So if you sell on Amazon, you already know there's a whole bunch of returns. It's 7 to 15% depending on the category you're on. A lot of brands don't want to pass on that, especially if you're selling electronics. And that's not really a focus for us anymore. I mean, we're spreading into other categories, but if you're selling electronics, your cost of goods is pretty expensive. So you don't want to throw out those returns. We take those returns for you, and we refurbish them. We kind of white box them and we send them back out into the marketplace, and we cut a check for the once we sell those returns for them. So kind of like recouping cost.
Mm.
And then the biggest side of it, Sonny, I'd say is wholesale. So I did mention the story a couple of times, but in 2019, I got one of my Amazon accounts shut down. And anybody that's been through that knows your money is just taken away, right?
Yeah.
So that's when we kind of made an active decision to really look at Amazon as a channel and not necessarily a business. So we kind of cap Amazon to 10% of our business. So out of 228 million, we cap Amazon to 20 million. And that's not necessarily because we can't do more than 20 million. That's because we don't want to do more than 20 million on Amazon. And then the rest of that 228 million is wholesale. So it's a lot of distribution, a lot of B2B sales. So it's taking the same products that we might sell in e-commerce and selling it distribution all around the US to other electronics manufacturers, to other electronics wholesalers.
Oh, yeah. It sounds like pretty intense business. If you only have 10% of your business on Amazon and you still have 228 million top line, it sounds pretty crazy. I think I haven't been in this space for a while. I think when I first started in 2015, everything was let's have some diversification. Amazon isn't the sales channel to be on. And then now the narrative is kind of like, hey, we only want to buy Amazon FBA businesses. That's the only type of business model right now that aggregators want to work with. But we see now the emotional and the financial impact of having so, so much of your business's revenue come through one sales channel and what can happen when that goes down. So I think it's pretty interesting that you guys are capping that to 10%, but still doing such a large volume. I think it kind of speaks volumes of what your strategy is overall and how successful it is. So if we could right now, I kind of want to quickly talk about how we met and how that kind of interaction first started. So I never told you this, but when I first got to the event, I'm always looking around. And for me personally, it takes me a while to warm up to people. So if anyone's ever gone to a live event before, you always have I always find like very interesting dynamics. Some people are very talkative, some people aren't. You may be in a big crowded room and you can easily just talk to the person next to you, or you guys may just be walking and you never have the opportunity to talk to anyone. So on this first or second day, I kept seeing you like walking around and I'm like, oh, this person is talking to that key person. Like every single time there was a big speaker or someone I knew that was big in the space, I would look and you're literally right next to them. And by the second day, I was like, this guy knows what he's doing. This guy knows what he's doing. So at one point, I think I forgot who you were talking to at one point. I just came up right behind you and I even said, hey man, like I always see you talking to the right person. Like I just want to know a little bit more about who you are and like and what you're working on. And then when you dropped, I think it was like 20 or 30 million, you dropped that number. I was like, that's what you're doing. So one, I thought it was very interesting. And that I think people, whoever goes to any type of conference, right, regardless of your skill level, you always want to be talking to as many people as you want. And you never know, like the person you talk to, like what can come of it. Like right now, I just want to find out how you were able to talk to all these people. But then I come to find out like you're doing all these amazing numbers and like the huge impact you're having right now in the space. So I really encourage anyone that's going to any kind of event, really get out there, talk to people that you think obviously can help your business, but just talk to everyone because you never know what can happen. And so if you could maybe talk to your experience, what's your strategy for going to different people at these events? Are you just walking up to them and talking to them? How do you kind of go about that?
Yeah, I mean, well, first of all, I appreciate that. I mean, my goal, especially post COVID, was honestly to talk to any and everybody. Like you said, you never know who's next to you. And a lot of people, I mean, if you're doing it right, you should be pretty humble. So just because somebody is sitting next to you and looking all humble and they're not necessarily a speaker or whatnot, doesn't mean you shouldn't talk to them. But my goal into going to these conferences, honestly, just try to find something to connect with somebody, throw in a joke there or two. And if they're a speaker, kind of go up to them and tell them, hey, I really was part of your presentation. I've also had the same issue in my business. Well, what's your recommendations?
Right. Yeah.
And if you're sitting in a table, a lot of these conferences, there's a lot of seminars. And I don't necessarily try to go to every seminar. I try to go to all the networking events. So there was a 6-figure and 7-figure networking session in the Helium 10 Sell and Scale Summit. And I went to those rather than going to a lot of PBC seminars and whatnot, just because you never know who you're going to talk to. And I actually met somebody there that they've been in the same business that I've been in for 20 years, but I actually never heard of this guy. And it's so crazy because he's only 20 minutes away from my warehouse. And he has a bigger warehouse than mine 20 minutes away. So the world is small, but it's, you kind of have to meet everybody.
Yeah.
So my key advice is really just to try to connect somewhere. If it's a speaker, try to connect based on their presentation. If they're not a speaker, just go up to them and throw a joke in there. You always want to have that one liner. I actually know a guy that all he does in these conferences is go up to somebody and go, hey, You look very familiar. I think I met you before.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's the best way, but
Yeah.
you just want to go up and kind of be like, hey, what does you can read their name tag? What does this do? Whatever
Right.
stuff like that.
Right.
Tell me
Yeah.
more
Yeah.
about business.
Yeah, definitely hacks here for how to get the most out of a event. And I mean, one thing I've noticed, I've only gone to maybe a handful of events. When I first started going to events, it was like 2017, 2018, pre-COVID. But I think a lot has changed. We talk about the current state of the internet, how easy it is to access next level information. Everyone's got a course now. Everyone's got a mastermind. I feel like it's really easy now to access pretty in-depth information to get you to your first seven figures. And I find at least the seminars that I'm going to now and the masterminds I'm going to now, like these in-person events, it's the networking that you're going to get most of the value. You're not going to get, in my opinion, you're not going to get the value that you would get at a like a one-on-one or like a mixer than you would get, like you said, sitting at a PPC mastermind. Like almost always, in my opinion, you can find that kind of stuff on 20 different YouTube videos. So I think mixing and networking is absolutely critical. And one tip that I was just now thought about now that you mentioned it, we try and get into big networking events or talk to that one key speaker. Sometimes I find that at many of these events I go to, I'll be right next to the key speaker. And then I'll get a little nervous and I'll talk to him later. Or like, hey, I want to talk to this person, but right now I'm just not feeling it. I'll talk to him later. And there's been sometimes these certain events that I go to, I think I'm going to get the opportunity to talk to the person I'm sitting right next to after lunch or later on. And then I end up not seeing them again, like at all. So like for me, from now on, anytime I see someone that I want to talk to, I immediately, if I'm right next to them, I'll just strike up a conversation. And one thing I found very interesting in all this and trying to network is we had Nia Patel. If anyone knows who he is, he's like super huge in the SEO e-commerce space. And I really want to meet him in person and get a photo, and Gary Vaynerchuk to get a photo with. Now, I knew going into the event that Gary Vaynerchuk was not going to take a photo with anyone. I like was able to network my way into the people who were paying for the sponsor tables, and I found out like he basically wasn't meeting with anyone. Most people on the even on the Helium 10 team were not able to meet with him. And right at the very end, I was able to network my way up to the sponsors table, like the sponsors booth where you and I ended up sneaking up into. But on the second day, I got invited up there and it snuck up in there. And I was a step away from meeting Gary Vee, but the sponsor who invited me had to leave last minute to handle something completely different. But I had my book ready to go that Gary Vee had given, and I wanted to get it signed and get a photo with Gary Vee. But that never ended up happening. But I got super close just by networking. And the one last tip I kind of wanted to mention here is I was able to meet Neo Patel. And what I did is I just showed up early. So I knew that most people don't even show up on time. So Neil Patel, the big speaker, he had a separate event off to the side where you could come and meet him. And what I did is, I would imagine that most people are either going to show up on time or a few minutes late. And I was like, this guy's speaking. He's one of the key main events. Let me show up 15 minutes early to the actual room. So I did. And I was literally the first person to meet Neil Patel there, his entire team. And then within minutes of me getting there, the whole room got crowded and packed and nobody could talk to him. I was able to ask my question. And if anyone was interested, my question was to Neil Patel. With his background in SEO and Google, I asked him, hey, what do you think is the number one thing that the Amazon sellers can do from an SEO perspective to drive sales and rank on Amazon? And I know someone as big as him doesn't have his hands on the wrench turning nuts and bolts, right? But he said exactly what I say in my course personally. And I thought that was very interesting that him and I aligned on this. And he said, he went straight to the point, and it's what I teach in my course. And he said, just focus on sales velocity. I always, people want to talk about BSR, rank, search volume, this new tool and this and that, or this, how much you're making your KPI, talk cost, ACOS, whatever it is. And he just said, focus on sales velocity. And that's one thing that I always just bring it back down to the fundamentals. And he just had that right. And it came right off the hip. He thought about it for a second and he just really internalized it and shot that out. So I wanted to give that to anyone listening because I thought that was interesting information. So yeah, so let's talk about next. What I thought was really interesting was you ended up leaving this summit before the two main speaking events and going to another summit. So if you could maybe explain as to why you did that and why you're choosing to go to all these different summits. What's the goal here?
Yeah. So actually, speaking of Gary Vee, by the way, because I left early, I had one of the people on my team. They actually filmed the entire Gary Vee presentation because I was really bummed down that I had to leave the day before. But yeah, I mean, So I went to the Funnel Hack Summit, and that was honestly just experimental more than anything. I don't do anything with funnel hacking. I don't do anything that Russell Brunson puts out there or whatnot. But that was really just networking experience and very experimental. And I actually ended up meeting a lot of key people in the Amazon space over there. So the reason why I'm going to all these summits, the week before I met you, I was also in Seattle for another summit, which was the Amazon Accelerate Summit. And that was also very good for networking and whatnot. But I'm going there to just meet sellers and kind of tell them about, hey, this is who we are. We are operators in this space. We've been doing this for X amount of years, and kind of just put a face to the name and really talk about our story. Because the next step for us, our next vision is to really become an incubator. So the reason I say incubators, not aggregators, there's a key distinction for me. Whereas a lot of aggregators are financially, they're acquiring brands, but they're really just financially backed. They're hiring people left, right, and center. You don't necessarily know the history of who you're going to work with within the aggregators. For us, we're incubators. We've done this. We have a very successful track record. We grew it organically. We have people on the team that have been here for years. And really the next step for us is to acquire or invest in and hire people that have their own ideas and their own ambitions on e-commerce, hire them internally and give them a full-time position and let them grow their brands inside Basatne, using the full suite of products that Basatne offers, from our WMS softwares, our logistics, our warehousing, our footprint in Canada, US, and all the other countries. So really that's what we're doing now. We're really trying to acquire, invest in, or incubate a lot of these brands. And I've actually had success doing that. I've met a lot of key people that have their own brands, but they don't necessarily have the tolerance that we do or the cash flow that we do. So I met a lot of people at the shows that were interested in kind of getting incubated, but don't necessarily want to go to a big aggregator.
Yeah, that's really interesting because I think you guys fill a very unique slot for third-party sellers. Just like you said, people who don't want to take that risk of selling, maybe even selling their business or letting it all go toward an aggregator that probably doesn't have as much business experience compared to a company that's been operating as long as you guys have. Then on top of that, being incubated versus being VC backed, right? So I think that's very interesting. What would you say is like your perfect clientele, or some that would be the best match working with you?
Yeah, I mean, I think the perfect client is somebody who either there's kind of two routes. I mean, you could just have an amazing idea that you haven't necessarily started, but the idea is so good that people will believe in it. And we're willing to take those people on, but other people necessarily take home 100K and whatnot. They want to grow that though. And they don't necessarily know how, just because they lack know-how, or sometimes they have all the know-how, they just don't have the cash flow. Because having an Amazon business, you know very well that when you make a sale on Amazon, they're keeping the money for 15 to 30 days.
Mm.
And then you have to invest in inventory continuously. You have to, all the PPC you have to pay for. So it's a lot of money going out. And at the same time, your payments are delayed. So sometimes cash flow is a huge issue. So really, I would say there's two perfect clientele: one that hasn't necessarily started, but lack the know-how, but they have a perfect idea, which we can incubate and obviously invest in and give them all our know-how and our full suite of products. The other person is really somebody who just has cash flow issues, not necessarily of any fault of their own, but it's really just the nature of the business. There's a lot of inventory to invest in. You could go to Amazon lending and whatnot, but the rates aren't necessarily perfect with Amazon lending or Clearco or any other investment bank.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, so if someone was interested in an opportunity like this, how would they go about finding you or your company?
Yeah, so I mean, my Instagram is Osaid Abu. So that's Osaid Abu. Email is Osaid at Basatne. That's BASATNE.com. And you can obviously reach out through the company website as well, basatne.com. That's BASATNE.com. I'm working on changing that though. We got to get an easier name in there. So
Okay.
we have bought out a crazy crap load of domains, and we're in the middle of changing that right now.
Okay, yeah, definitely. So for anyone listening, I'll throw the links down in the description below. But that got me thinking, and I'm going to pivot the conversation heavily here, but it got me thinking just some of the stuff you were showing me as we were listening to some of the talks that were going on. If you could tell me that little quick story about how you flipped that one domain. You show me that one domain. If you could tell me like a quick story and let the rest of people know about that.
Yeah, I hope I don't get sued for this, but yeah, I mean, so during the NFT craze, I was researching for one weekend about NFTs and what we could do in the space and whatnot. And after 48 hours of research, I wasted my entire weekend on this. This is really just a scam. It's not a scam. It's a lot of network externalities. That's how NFTs work. So for anybody that doesn't know what a network externality is, it's really something that gets better as there's more people on it. And it was mainly the famous people that were making money off NFTs, and a lot of people are ending up holding the bag if they're not famous. So it was really for the most part, it's a pump and dump scheme. But NFTs are good. There's a lot of applications for NFTs, just not necessarily kind of what was going on at the time. So this was a year ago, I think 2021, actually a little bit over a year ago now, probably a year and a half ago, where I did this research. And if anybody remembers the $1 million homepage domain, it was this domain where this guy that was going to school, he wanted $1 million. He needed to pay for college tuition, and he wanted $1 million. So he thought of an idea where he registered the domain $1,000,000homepage.com. And in that domain, he sold 1 million pixels. It was 1,000 by 1,000 canvas, and he was selling every pixel for $1. So I think Amazon actually bought some ad space on there as well. But the problem with the domain is, like, after $1 million, he sold all the 1 million pixels. There was nowhere to go. So I thought of, what if we actually do that $1 million homepage website, but do it with NFTs? So you can purchase the pixels and you can resell them, because it's digital real estate. That's really what it is. And that's what NFTs enable people to do. So I bought pixelsnft.com. Couldn't believe it was available, pixelsnft.com. And just like any great idea you have, you wake up the next morning and you're kind of lazy and you don't do anything with it. So that's what ended up happening. A month later, I get an email saying, "Hey, I'd like to purchase your domain, $500. Keep in mind, I bought this for $10. I told him, no, thank you very much. Unless it's 50K, don't even talk to me. He sends another email and says, okay, $5,000. I'm like, no, thank you very much. He's like, okay. I'm like, thank you very much. I'm willing to go down to 25K. He's, all right, I'll up it to $15,000. If you do not sell it to me, I will sue you. I am the owner of pixels.com. So pixels.com is I think it's a fairly large company. They sell art, real art, nothing to do with NFT. So I contacted a bunch of lawyers. I'm like, hey, can they do this? And then the guy actually submitted a cyber squatting to the forum, which is the forum runs all these domains. So they locked in my domain until I resolve this legal matter. So I went back to the guy. I'm like, okay, well, that's fine. I'll sell it to you for 15. You have to unlock my domain and whatnot. So which he did. That's mainly because I got legal advice that told me, hey, you can go fight this. The lawyer that I actually spoke to was the same lawyer that fought LV.com against Louis Vuitton. And he told me, don't hire me. It's going to cost you 10K. You want 25K, just kind of close it at 15K. So I messaged him back. I told him, hey, I'll sell it to you for 15K. And let's go from there. And he did. He unlocked the domain. He submitted the resolution form and unlocked the domain, and we went from there.
Wow. Interesting story. So that gets me thinking about many things. As you tell that story, it gets me thinking about a lot of things. But some of the big things that got me thinking about, one, the biggest like hacker flip from $10 to 15K, $10 investment to 15K, absolutely ridiculous. I can't even imagine how on that. I'm bad at street math, so I'm not even going to try. So that is a crazy story. And the second one got me thinking about is, okay, someone doing, part of a team doing 228 million a year. You're busy as hell. You got all these things going on. You show me at the time, you show me the photo of the warehouse you have going on, some of the challenges that you have working with big partners that come and say, hey, we have these 50,000 electronics that need to be dropped off today. Can you help me? Can you help me? Can you help me? From these really big name brands that people have in their pocket or around their household. And you're solving these huge problems. And then at the end of the day, you're still flipping domain names for $10 to 15K. I thought that was it got me like thinking, okay, this guy knows his stuff. He's not just someone up in a big company that I haven't heard about that's doing huge numbers. He's still, at the end of the day, he's grounded in reality. He's grounded in an operator's mentality and an entrepreneur's mentality of, hey, let's get this done. Let's make some big moves. And I thought that was really interesting and inspiring to see, because since I've sold my business and I've started working with other big brands out there and bigger companies, when I start talking to them, kind of peek behind the curtains a little bit, I find them so singularly focused in their one job, in their degree that they're leaning on, or their previous job where they come from a good title or a good background, and it's almost like they kind of stop growing, they stop expanding in that way. So I thought it was very interesting that you're actually like still kind of doing this. You still have your hands on the wheel, and you're still making it happen. And then on top of that, the story about, okay, you actually worked with a lawyer who also does LV, or who did that whole legal issue with LV, Louis Vuitton. And I thought to myself, oh wow, look at that network there as well. So in that one story, as we were hacked our way up to the sponsors booth by just walking up there, and then you tell me this whole story, and you show me some of the software you're working on and the problems it solves for huge brands, and the idea that you came up with and executed, I thought it was absolutely remarkable. So I really appreciate you telling that story. And with that, I kind of want to, I know we're running short on time here. I want to kind of close off the podcast here, close off the show, and then let anyone know again, if you're interested in working with Osaid, his team, or have an interesting idea, or you're an entrepreneur who's ready to cash flow and kind of scale out your business, definitely check the links down below in the description. And Osaid, if you have any kind of parting advice for other sellers out there, other people who may be struggling to get a business off the ground, or kind of move their business forward, if you have any parting advice, please, now's the time.
Yeah, I mean, well, so thank you for saying I'm grounded in reality. I do really try to be in the office all the time and be very involved with my team, but just advice for anybody that's looking to start, you don't necessarily need to take all these courses that are charging 5,000, 10,000. I've said this before. I mean, there's a ton of podcasts out there. I mean, your podcast is free. There's a ton of advice out there for free. The main advice I'd give everybody is really just start. I have a lot of people messaging me all the time. I post pictures of my warehouse. I'm very proud of my warehouse. I spend a lot of time there, but I have a lot of people message me, hey man, how do you get started? Who do you buy from? Who do you sell to? I'm like, you're asking the wrong questions. Just start. You never know who's going to end up at your door tomorrow. He's offering you product, whether it be a small guy or a company as big as Google. Just start. And honestly, once you start, kind of the ball starts rolling. A lot of people ideate for too long, and they're ideating in their bed, looking at YouTube, and they're, oh, how do I make money off this? You never know how you're going to make money when you start. You just start, and eventually the ideas just come by themselves.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. To be honest, that kind of information cannot be overstated. Just starting is beyond, I mean, it can't be measured, because it was, even for me, like I look at some of my fellow entrepreneur friends who have been telling me for years. I have friends that have bought Amazon courses 5 years ago that messaged me a month ago and said, hey man, I'm finally going to start. And I haven't heard from them since. And I know they haven't started. I know they haven't started. I myself am still a victim of this. I told myself when TikTok was Musically back in 2018, 2019, before then, I told myself then I would make TikTok videos. Right. And I only now just started making TikTok videos. So in a way, I feel like we all kind of go through different aspects of this in our life, whether it's business, professionally, personal aspects of our life. But I think really starting it really is half the battle, because after that, we lean on our momentum, we lean on our ability to push past failure to keep that momentum going. But at least for me, and I know for a lot of other people, starting is the hardest thing. So definitely take his advice to heart and just start. Like you said, there's a lot of free resources out there to start. What helped me start was a course. What helped me start was spending money, because at least for me, I hate wasting money. And back then it was a lot easier to waste $5,000, $10,000 on a mastermind on a course, because that's how much they cost back then. Now courses cost a few $100s. There's a bunch of courses on YouTube for free. I offer courses for $18 a month, and I put everything behind there. So definitely check out people that you know and trust. Spend a little bit of time, but once it feels right in your stomach, go ahead and pull that trigger. And like you said, just start. So Osaid, thank you again for being on the show. It was a pleasure meeting you, and hope to have you back on the show sometime soon.
Yeah, it was a pleasure. Yeah, thanks so much. And just closing off, I want to say, don't take my advice out of context. Some courses are good, but a lot of people spend the money on courses, but they don't necessarily go to courses. So make sure you actually research the course. I always said the Freedom Ticket on Helium, that is a really good course. If somebody's charging 10,000 for a course, it's probably not going to be worth 10,000.
Yeah, definitely.
So definitely just start. And I know a lot of people, like you mentioned TikTok, I know a lot of people get that feeling in their gut where they're scared and, oh, what is my family going to think of me and whatnot? Yeah. Once you get that feeling, you're about to do something right. So once you get that feeling, make sure you chase and you start going full throttle into it.
Yeah, definitely lean into that. Okay. I think that's it for now.
now.
Yeah. Hey, thank you so much for being on the show, and we'll be in touch, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you, Reggie.
Cool. Thanks. Have a good one.